So
Yeah,
welcome, Katerina. You were born and raised
in Taiwan,
in
but I
Taiwan.
live mostly in the States. But right now I'm in Switzerland.
Okay,
Yes.
truly a woman of the world. So
Why not?
yeah, people come to yoga for many reasons. Maybe they start with a certain reason, and then it evolves for them. What brought you to yoga?
Well, physical reasons. So when I was in college, I was studying dance, but one day my knees gave out. I was in pain every step of the way. So my doctor said, "You will never be able to dance again and you need surgery." Otherwise, because later on I realized I have deformity in my kneecaps. They were too small in size and too high up for their position. So I was looking for a movement that allowed me to move without pain. And that's how I found yoga. So fast forward in 97, I had a couple of spinal fractures. And back in the days, all my doctors and even my chiropractor, who's an avid yoga practitioner, he said, without surgery, you will have an old lady's back. You will be hunching forward. And logically, it made sense because when you have a fracture in the spine, everything above it and beneath it, the thoracic and lumbar juncture is when I had the injury, will start to shift and cave in. So, because I had already used yoga to help my knees without surgery, I totally just trusted that this was going to be my way. I didn't know at the time. I didn't have really a teacher guiding me. I just sort of went about my way intuitively. And that's how I got committed with yoga on a day-to-day basis, because when I was able to move a little bit after 1 month in bed, I started to doing very gentle asana breath work for myself. And when I had skipped a day, excruciating pain will come back. So that's how I got committed with the physical yoga. Uh, but
How has it
uh,
evolved?
what was that?
How has it evolved? You came in with the physical, and has your practice and your commitment and why you practice yoga
Yes.
now changed?
Yes, how it evolved was because I was myself very much. I used it as a therapy for my spinal injuries and my deformity for my knees. So I always kept yoga, and after grad school, because I was studying to be a teacher, and when I was teaching, I had encountered a lot of children with special needs, and I heard about this lady, Sonia Sumar Shivakami. She had a training about how to work with children with special need using yoga. So that was my first teacher training course I took. And so I started doing yoga. I started to use yoga as therapy for children with special needs. And I started to see a tremendous amount of benefit and positive results. And that's how I got even more committed with yoga. So, and then many trainings I took afterwards, I took about 5 different trainings after her training, were mostly I went into it because it was for my own personal development. I didn't really think about, staying and become a yoga teacher. But that's how it evolved sort of naturally. Yeah, so it was starting. I started as a yoga therapist, and then I started to work with adults, and it just slowly evolved. So about 10 years ago, I encountered a life-threatening illness, and it took me about 2 years. I was in ICU, in another ICU for about 2 months. And I got better, I got worse. The whole ordeal took about 2 years. Towards the very end, I was literally in bed for about 6 months. So when I first woke up, literally sitting up was the job of the day. And then slowly moving, being able to walk, and taking the trash out was like a marathon. And that's, I mean, so I experienced this phase in my life where I had to literally put my body back together again. So I went from a successful yoga teacher, owning my own studio, appearing cover of yoga magazines, training teachers, young teachers, and conducting workshops and retreats internationally, to this literally a crippled person. And out of that experience of putting myself back together, I discovered a lot of movement that were inspired by yoga for sure, but they were actually a lot more inspired by looking at nature. Because the fact that I couldn't move for a long time, I had to spend a lot of quiet time just sitting by the river, looking at the water, looking at the sky. And slowly, I utilized what I knew from yoga and developed a lot of curative, restorative, regenerative movements that literally recuperate my physical faculties, but also my cognitive and dexterity articulations. So for a long time, for example, reading two sentences was very difficult for me. I had a lot of nerve damages, everything beneath my nose, I didn't have feelings. So to re-articulate my fingers and my speech was a huge ordeal. Fortunately, out of this ordeal, I realized how, and I figured out how to work with people with disabilities. People encounter life-threatening illnesses, and I also got a taste of what does it mean to encounter your mortality. Because back in the day, so many doctors told me that we don't really know if we're gonna be able to save you. So I had this experience where I had to let go of everything, and basically I had to imagine that I might not be around. And what is that like for elderly, for people in their old age, people who encounter life-threatening illnesses. So after that, I felt like although I was a successful yoga teacher, I didn't have the life experience for me to encounter what compassion really means. And so after that, I worked with the hospice of San Juan. You know, I moved to a very quiet, small island. I began to got involved with working with seniors, people with disabilities, and hospice patients. And that's, right now, thankfully, even though it was an unfortunate passage, but it really gave me this whole spectrum of how to work with young children all the way to that place where I had to tend to them towards the very last bit of their life. And yeah, so in a nutshell, this is what how I personally evolve with yoga. But this whole journey also gave me a realization of what yoga says, that your consciousness, your spirit is the most powerful, it's the most precious and most important. Without that, it's we're always overstraining our physical body. Asana practice, pranayama practice, they can only take you so much. So the notion that the quality of the soul in yoga, we have this chant, lead me from darkness to light, lead me from untruth to truth, from death to immortality. And all the spirituality across the world talks about granting you this immortality. What does that really mean? For me, it's the life of your soul. Something. What is it that does not perish? Your body, your physical body, had comes with a life shelf, comes with the expiration day. So my own experience made me real concur the fact that the real yoga, it's about working with your soul, working with your consciousness, working on acknowledging what is it inside you that could potentially be everlasting. Our soul life, our consciousness, just because it exists, is not to be taken for granted. It's still something that one has to reflect on a whole lot, to work on, to continuously polish. It's like even a piece of gold, a precious stone, needs continuous polish for it to shine. And our soul is like that. So real yoga for me, it's acknowledging that, and always choose what is not temporary, what is everlasting. In eight limbs, we have this saying about yamas and niyama, aparigrata. What does it mean not to accumulate? Today, I was really thinking about this notion of accumulation. It's not about accumulating objects, but accumulation of your ego. It's your ego that's reaching out, that needs to invest in your house, in your property, in your life insurance. This, our whole life, what is it that we're investing in? I think real yoga teaches us to invest in things that's not perishable, that you get to take away with after you leave your physical sheath, after you go beyond your mortal life. And to me, as a teacher, I need to stress that this is not a given. Just because we came in with spirit does not actually mean we leave with spirit. Just because we're typically healthy people, we don't have disability, does not mean that our spirit maintains intact when we leave. To me, the most horrible thing is to leave this world not knowing what our spirit is, not knowing who we are. To me, it's like entering to your spiritual realm, being handicapped, being, sorry to use this word, being a retard in another realm. So for me, as a teacher, I don't say it covertly because I don't think most people are interested in and are prepared. But in a covert level, I'm always trying to remind people and show people there's something intrinsically beautiful and forever youthful about our existence. And my way of teaching is invite people, show them a little glimpse of what that is. Something perhaps a lot of elderly people, a lot of people with special needs, disability can understand, because they don't have the faculty, that the luxury to allow them to really explore the materialistic adventure of this world. Sometimes because some of us have the limitation, we are being invited or guided to see a part of our existence that's not often available to people who are always relying on the ego to navigate, if that's clear. When we face the end of our life, why is it so fearful? Why is it so much uncertainty? Is because we know we're losing the body, and the body is connected to the ego. So if one's yoga practice is about understanding that we're not just a body and there is something else to be polished. And I think it's very important for the teacher to indicate, to invite the student to have the interest of seeing that aspect of our existence.
So that brings me to another really interesting point about teaching online. When you have that idea that that covert operation of uh, facilitating, evoking that remembrance of the eternal in your students, how did you do it? And was the result peace? Like the panic and pandemic, did you actually develop or have that engendered in your students? Did they find peace because of doing yoga with you online? And how did you do that?
Absolutely. So I think it's just a different technique, Donna, because precisely like I was mentioning earlier, that there is a part of us that is not our astral body, our spirit body is not bound to time and space. It does not recognize time and space. Just like sometimes, don't you have this feeling that you feel like you're a 3 year old still? When you talk to an elderly, people in their 90s, they feel like I'm still a kid. Our astral body, our spirit body is not limited to time and space. And if the teacher can acknowledge that in them, they can turn up the dial. They can they can emit their energy to a designated location. Doesn't matter how far they are. And to my surprise, this was something I had a lot of question when I first went online, because they cannot touch me. They cannot see me. They cannot follow either me or other students. Sometimes, you're in a group class, you can't see the teacher, but you could see somebody next to you and you kind of imitate what other people are doing. But because I'm not in front of them, I really need to mentally trust that my energy is going to be there. And it's sort of like when I'm teaching in class, I don't have to look at you to know what you're doing. Etherically, energetically, we are linked. And if the teacher is teaching out of love, that connection does not diminish. It's like a mother. I was a kindergarten teacher. So when the child is in another room, the teacher or the mother doesn't have to know what the child is doing. The mother just know. It's like you have this invisible umbilicus cord connected to them. If the teacher really is coming from a place of love, this invisible thread between you and your student, to me, it's like I'm the puppeteer, just nobody sees that string. In some way, this is how the true yoga works. God has a string. God is the one who's doing all this to us. And we're like, we don't really know who's pulling the string. It's a little bit like that. Now I just need to cast my string out into another world, to America, to Asia, to people that I work with. And I'm surprised to see that when I work with new students who's never even see me in person, even though they have special needs, they still receive just the same amount of benefit, if not more. People start to have a shift even after 1 or 2 sessions with me. I see the way their face look. You could see their temperature. You could see. I think one of the wonderful thing about being yoga is that you start to read their energy. You can understand how their body feels just by looking at how they hold themselves, how the shape of their face totally change. Because what I do is like I'm trying to penetrate them from the spirit down. By the time I influence their physical body, I am already working and talking, and I'm trying to touch their spirit. To me, the physical movement, it's the last in the pile. It's never the first on the pile. When I work with a person, I don't see them having age. I don't see them having something. Over a period of time, I had to really train myself to acknowledge the person's spirit, to understand who they are besides the name tag. In Buddhism, there's this saying that this meditation, what is my face before the birth of my parents? I have to really be even better at um, when I teach in classroom, in real classroom. In some way, it's actually more magical for me. It's more even interesting for me to teach when I'm far away from people. Yeah, it's the same as when you love someone so much, and when they're far away from you, all of a sudden you cannot touch them anymore. Your love
Sorry.
and how they inspire you does not diminish at all. This feeling, it's like it's even actually more potent, and that makes me concur the true essence of yoga, because because I've been working with yoga for so long. I think it's a very natural tendency. You're always testing, you're always questioning, is this true? How do I know? You're always testing your boundary, you're always trying to polish your tool as a teacher. Yeah,
Gosh, there's so many questions I'd love to continue asking. One of them is how do you work with the elderly? The ones that are on are they on their deathbeds and you're there at the
absolutely. Absolutely.
hospital?
Yes.
So what does
You
that look
connect with their spirit.
like?
Their
Okay.
spirit, again, it does not come with a shelf life. And if they are not every old person, it depends on the person. Some people, they have become jaded when they're in their teenagers. I remember when 20 years ago, I have been periods in my life where I was very, very full of pride, full of ignorance. I have been there. But it really depends on the character. I think as a hospice person, as a hospice worker, or as a teacher, it's it's very important that you understand the character that you're encountering does not have a shelf life. What is their true essence before all that has happened to them? Same thing when I work with people who have been experienced trauma or abuse in their life. Who are they before they have encountered all these trauma? There's something intrinsic in us that does not change. Doesn't matter what happens. Have you have experience in your life where you do certain things and you feel like, wow, that's what I've been doing this since I was 3 year old, right? Something in you does not change. There's always something very much intrinsic in us, and one has to be very quick in recognize that. There have been periods of my life where I was around homeless people a lot. And because being around homeless people, they don't have anything anymore. They don't have home, they don't have house, they don't have families, they don't have friends, they have no belongings. Nothing. But what they do have is their spirit. And what do I need to acknowledge in their existence, which is their spirit, for them to feel like they've been seen by me. Same thing when we work with special need children. They don't have speech, they don't have physical articulation, they don't know how to manage their emotion, they don't have a sense of boundary, they don't have awareness. But what they do have is that spirit. And what do I need to do to acknowledge that spirit inside them? It's like the promise that we all came with. It's like every seed. Now the spring is here. Before the flower blossom, there's a seed inside them. That seed is full of promise, full of spirit, right? So it's that initial seed that one needs to recognize. So when I work with older people, oftentimes it really depends on my ability to be able to see that. And with older people, you cannot really, sorry this word, you cannot bullshit with them. They've been around for so long. They know they're not into the superficiality. They're not into anything that's not important anymore. So, but what they do treasure is that you connect with them on the level of the spirit. What is the most treasurable things in life? Sometimes it's actually very, very simple. It's no different than when you see a child, you feel connected because there is no agenda. They just see you as a person. Sometimes we feel like we've been seen by a child more so than an adult. Yes. Yeah.
So practically speaking, I'm just trying to imagine what that's like. What's a session like? Um, Connecting with this with somebody that is at that end stage of life, is it just being your presence, connecting to their spirit? Is it in silence? Is it dialogue? Is it movement?
Silence. Usually with older people, silence. Like a child, silence. It's basically you are working on another level. Oftentimes in silence, a lot could be communicated. And fortunately, I have always have issues with verbal communication to begin with. So on a personal level, it's actually easier for me to connect with people without words. It's it's just something I have, but I had to over the period polish my wisdom body because without wisdom, you can't just be this and that. There's some understanding that's happening. When I see an older person, I don't see their age, I don't see the wrinkle in their skin, I don't see the stiffness of their body, but I see the spirit. I see something that does not belong to time, that does not belong to the physical shell. Just like when I work with a young kid, I could totally fathom what they will become when they're in their 30s, when they grow up, when they're in their 40s. So when I work with elderly, I could see how they used to be when they're in their 30s, when they're in their 20s. I start to have a connection with them on the level that's not that's not hard. And I think to me, again, this is what makes me continue to be interested in yoga because this is the essence of yoga. To me, namaste means may we recognize each other beyond the limitation of time and space.
That's a beautiful um, sentiment to close on. So, in closing, um,
Yes,
I just,
translation. Yeah, I feel like my job here is how do I deliver spirituality, yoga, the teaching of yoga without naming? Without, right now, I don't use Sanskrit anymore because I feel like, our communication needs to stay on the level where people can process. I can every student of mine, they have a different way to understand words and verbiage. It's, to me, I see myself as a translator between the worlds, between the spirit world and this earthly world. And it's fun in a challenging way. It keeps me youthful. It keeps me delighted to be able to learn their language. It's almost like when I see the person, I have to speak their language. Not like English or Chinese or Sanskrit, but I have to deliver what is it their spirit can comprehend, what is their pattern of thinking, what what's intriguing to them.
it's a listening, a deep listening to be able to.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's like when you see a bird, you want to go. When you see a cat, you want to go meow. You want to relate to that. You want them to know that you're trying at least. I think don't ever underestimate the essence of striving. We're not perfect, but the person can comprehend that you're striving to understand them. To me, as a teacher, that's like halfway there. So again, it's like, may we recognize each other beyond the limitation of time and space. To me, that's a beautiful notion.
There we have it. There's
Can
the
you hear the church bell? You hear the church bell?
yeah, yeah,
Isn't that beautiful?
yeah.
Yeah, it's a reminder. It's a reminder. It's a beautiful reminder. I love that. Yeah, yeah.
Hallelujah to the end.
Yes,
Exclamation point.
absolutely. Yes,
Oh,
rejoice.
thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.